and welcome to GSE 2020, the virtual conference in these strange and different times which we find ourselves. There's, however, two things that are constant. One is GSE is taking place in November, and the second is there is a new release of GDPS this year, and I'm here to give you the lowdown on what's included in this new release of GDPS that was shipped back at the end of March this year, but also to give you a view of what's happened since and what might be coming in the near future as well. So without further ado, let's get started. As far as I understand, you can ask questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat to see if any questions come up. I'll try and get to them in real time rather than waiting at the end when their context may have been lost slightly. I know it's a slightly clunky way of doing it, and if we find we need to unmute, allow people to unmute, that's fine. We'll allow that as well, because normally we get a degree of interaction in these sessions, and I'm all for that. So let's crack on. The first thing is just a brief reminder. This is the last time that we will show this chart, but a few years ago now, GDPS did some rebranding, and these are the new names, basically. So GDPS PPRC became GDPS Metro, and we stuck in global for the asynchronous replication solutions, and we combined Metro Global in the 3 and 4 site solutions. We also rebranded GDPS Active to be continuous availability, because quite frankly, there was a lot of confusion between what is a Metro 2-site parallel sysplex that's active across 2 sites, which is called Active, and the GDPS Active solution, which was 2 sysplexes, which were both active. So we decided to rename to GDPS Continuous Availability in order to try and remove some of the confusion. Okay, so that's the naming. The next slide is really just a reminder that GDPS is made up of a number of parts. We have introduced and will continue to introduce, where we're adding significant new function, a number of priced features. These features are priced for a reason, and that is we had a choice when we were deciding to introduce these new features. We could increase the support and subscription charge so that everybody paid a bit more for GDPS support and subscription, so we could continue to fund development, or we could introduce a separately licensed feature in order to have those who are going to use it to pay for those features. So we decided on the latter, being arguably the more fair, so that if you have a requirement to use the ZOS proxy or dual leg feature, then there is a small fee to be paid for the license, rather than everybody contributing to the ongoing development of those new features and so on. So that's the separately priced features, just to make that perfectly clear to people. We tend not to talk about commercials during these sessions, so I will skip beyond that right away. So GDPS 4.3, what's different? Well, the first thing that's different is, you may remember there was a little bit of pain getting to GDPS 4.1 when migrating from GDPS PPRC, and that pain, I won't say also existed for 4.2, because we did something structural within GDPS in 4.2 to remove some of the policy items from the system automation policy and put them into new XML files. And that meant there was a migration step, which was a little bit more cumbersome and so on. But the good news is, with 4.3, there isn't anything really of that nature. So there's no key migration considerations for moving to 4.3 over and above anything that was in place prior to 4.1. So that's, making sure that you check PSP, because, in this instance, there is a conditioning APAR or a prereq APAR for 4.2 to enable them to coexist. But that's it. It's not like you have to go through this enhanced migration or big bang approach, as long as you are migrating from 4.2. So we still provide the N and N-1 coexistence. And likewise, from a support perspective, we still will support the 3 most current releases of GDPS. A brief statement on here is, we do not recommend that you run for extended, or you don't plan to run for extended periods of time running mixed release configurations. And why do we say that? Well, quite simply because we don't. When we test coexistence, we test it for a period of time, and we do not run for months with a mixed release configuration. We do it for a matter of days and weeks. So are there anything that could come out if you spend longer running in a coexistence mode? Quite likely not, but we can't say with our hands on our heart that we would recommend running two different levels of GDPS in the same sysplex for any period of time. And one good reason for doing that is the fact that new functionality typically only is enabled once you get all the systems to the new release. There are some exceptions to it, but typically speaking, when we introduce a new goodie to GDPS, you have to get all of the GDPS systems that are part of the solution up to the latest level in order to be able to take any benefit from it. And the other thing that we just wanted to kind of highlight is when we are updating our GDPS environments in the in the first quarter timeframe, we will do that typically by updating the controlling systems first and then the production systems. And from the controlling systems perspective, we will update the alternate controlling system before updating the master. And this is our recommended migration approach. Obviously, you're at liberty to do it differently, but if you follow the way we recommend, then you are less likely to uncover any strange and peculiar migration gotchas. All right, so let's get into what's actually in 4.3, and we'll look at each of the different solution areas in turn, and then we'll go through some of the more significant features in a little bit more detail. So GDPS Metro, what is there in GDPS Metro that's new in 4.3? Well, one of the first things to highlight is the Preserve Mirror tool has been reborn. The Preserve Mirror tool enables you to, with minimum disruption, add devices to the configuration. The good news is the Preserve Mirror tool was rolled back to 4.1 and 4.2, so it's not just a 4.3 goodie. So yeah, one of our exceptions, as we say, to enable you to take the benefit from that. There is a new configuration wizard, and we'll spend a couple of charts on that later on, that simplifies the process of customizing some of the XML. There are a number of LCP enhancements that were also rolled into 4.2 SPE. In particular, the most significant of those was support for safeguarded copy. So since the beginning of this year, we have had support, in fact, the very end of last year, we've had support for the safeguarded copy function on the DS8000s to enable you to deploy a logical corruption protection or cyber resiliency solution for the mainframe environment. There's multiple topologies supported, and we'll touch on those later on in the presentation as well. And with the introduction of the safeguarded copy support, we've extended and included these management profiles to enable you to define characteristics of the copies being taken, such things as expiration dates and things of that nature. There's some role-based security enhancements. Standard actions received some role-based security granularity, let's say, in the 4.2 SPE timeframe, as did the sysplex script statement, because that inherited it through the work that was done for the standard actions. And there is still a plan to deliver additional functions, in this case main panel options, later on this year, but that may slip to 4.4. We're not clear yet exactly if that will make it out in time. One of the bigger enhancements that goes across all the different GDPS flavors in 4.3 is the workflow enhancements. The workflow enhancements come from a set of requirements that have been placed upon us for a number of years, and may address all, but I would suggest address most of those requirements through the provision of the capability to start a script from any step within that defined script. You can inject a stop request for an executing script. and you can reset a failed script indicator. When I say failed, it's a script that has been stopped before it was really due to stop. You have injected that stop request. Now, what it doesn't do is provide a nice and simple way to cancel a script statement that is executing. And the reason that we have not done that is quite simply because there are dangers inherent in cancelling a script statement while it is executing, because you can leave your environment in an indeterminate state, particularly if it's in the midst of a copy management or copy services action. You can end up with some devices in one state, some in another, commands being issued to some, commands not being issued to others. And we did not want to provide you, a loaded shotgun with, cartridges at both barrels and have the trigger half pulled. So we have not provided the ability to cancel an executing script statement. We have support for the logger Y and logger Z functionality that was delivered with ZOS, and this allows you to use on the controlling systems the system logger. Again, this was a client requirement wanting to use SMF in particular in log streams on the controlling systems, and you can now do that by having independent logger couple data sets for your controlling systems. And this support was delivered with ZOS, and in conjunction with ZOS, we have support in GDPS. Heat map transfer has been improved from a performance perspective. I'm not going to go into any great detail on that. I don't know if any of you are major users of heat map transfer, but the transfer of information to the alternate controlling system has been significantly improved from a performance perspective. We have refreshed the GDPS virtual appliance. So if you are looking at a Linux only environment on the mainframe with no general purpose CPs on those boxes, then we now have an upgraded virtual appliance. We've gone to 4.2 in actual fact. That slide is incorrect. I believe we went to 4.2 rather than 4.1. And it also supports the SSI live guest relocation and KVM within as a hypervisor within the virtual appliance. We have improved or introduced, I should say, a number of health check extensions. Primarily, those health check extensions are to deliver and provide health checks for your ZOS proxy managed systems. So we have the health checker running on the proxy managed systems with a number of GDPS related health checks. And we'll spend a very brief moment looking at those in a bit more detail in some charts time. We have support back in GDPS for fixed block support using for freeze run support through the XDR protocol. There's a number of ZVM or XDR related problem determination enhancements, such as the ability to determine the XDR maintenance level via GDPS. And that, when I say XDR, it's the SAMP XDR element, plus the ability to get information more readily from the ZVM proxy guests directly from GDPS. We have introduced, again, as a 4.2 SPE and enhanced in 4.3, the secure service container capability, disaster recovery capability with GDPS. It does not support hyperswap. However, we do control the virtual IDAA or DB2 Analytics Accelerator, I should call it, using GDPS scripts, and we can manage the replication for that as well. The most recent enhancement, or what came out in 4.3 as an early SPE, was support for MGM3 site, and we have just heard that the required fix in the virtual IDAA for MGM4 site clients has now been released, and so we will be closing our support for the MGM4 site solution for the virtual IDAA as well. And another final item in the summary is the GDPS priv config file for ZVM for defining privileged commands and classes, and you can embed that file from your config files, and this replaces the former CPC or CP class exec, I should say, that was available in ZVM. So that's the high-level overview of what was in GDPS Metro. As I say, we'll come back to a number of these in greater detail in a few slides' time. For an MGM and GM perspective, we have reintroduced a command, the change GM site. It was removed by accident, I think is the best way to describe it. A hand has been put back because there are still use cases for this command in order to reorientate GDPS's brain as to where your GM session is actually running from, if indeed it loses its marbles, which shouldn't happen, but in some rare events, doing some strange manipulation of the replication outside of GDPS potentially can lead to strange results. And so you on occasion you have to reorientate GDPS to make sure it's fully aware of what's going on. As I've said, the support for the IDAA is introduced, and that is now available. We support flash copy onto the Global Mirror primary. So this is stage 1 of support for remote pair flash copy within Global Mirror and Metro Global Mirror environments. It does push a full copy of the data, but it doesn't, so it's not as smart as the Metro Mirror remote pair flash copy yet, in that the flash command is not synchronously executed on both primary and secondary devices, but we do now support the ability to have your flash copy targets in Metro Mirror and Global Mirror for MGM clients or indeed just GM2 site clients. Both solutions inherit the workflow enhancements that I touched on earlier, and we have a number of charts on in due course. We have introduced the LCP manager on a GM code base. So the initial delivery for the LCP manager feature within GDPS was on a Metro code base. We have successfully ported that code onto the GM code base, and we support a number of different configurations with LCP using the GM code base, which I'll come on to in a moment, and I'll explain where we are with some of the other topologies as well. And there were plans for a role-based security enhancement in GDPS GM, but I do not believe that's going to make 4.3 SPE. It will be 4.4 at the earliest. Okay, so next we have the GDPS XRC and MZGM highlights. Now, a lot of these are inherited, but some are continuation of a roadmap that we started some time ago around providing high availability for the MZGM foresight environments in particular. So we do support LCP for GDPS Metro in MZGM configurations. This is virtual isolation Metro Mirror 2 site in effect. But it works with no side effects to your MZGM aspects. We do not have a LCP function or capability directly for XRC itself. As you may well be aware, earlier this year, IBM did make an announcement that the current DS8000, that's the 8900 series, will be the last DS8000 that supports XRC or ZOS Global Mirror. As such, there has been a reduction in development and new function delivered for XRC and related solutions, and we are not progressing to develop a native LCP functionality for XRC clients. However, that said, we are continuing to improve the solution. And one of the things that we have done is release the Restful API for GDPS XRC, some of which are standard or common functions, but not solely. However, there are no direct replication management capability available through the Restful API. What you can do, of course, through the RESTful APIs, initiate a script, and those scripts can carry out that disk replication management on your behalf. It's just you can't get to the primitives, let's say, of those script actions. So a number of XRC high availability functions have been released. So hyperswap support for the XRC secondaries, and the dual cases and dual master support has been introduced. Redirection of SNA comms for incremental resync has been improved. XRC recoveries of devices in alternate subchannel set and enhanced HMT support. We've also improved some of the region switch, let's say, characteristics. So basically the time it takes in order to carry out some of the reconfiguration actions as part of a region switch have been enhanced. In particular, the stop session drain clip has been introduced in order to avoid the overhead of having to do an X recover partway through the region switch. From a role-based security perspective, you can use security equals SAF from a GDPS perspective in your GDPS Metro within the context of MZGM. So there's no reason not to do that should you have a need. And GDPS XRC does inherit the same workflow enhancements as mentioned for Metro and GM, and we will come on to in short time. So the enhancements for the GDPS XRC solutions. We have a number of also another enhancements for the GDPS continuous availability. So again, they've picked up some role-based enhancements from a security perspective. Improved systems monitoring. We've released the API support, so the REST API is available for GDPS CA. It also inherits the workflow enhancements, a number of, let's say, more minor RAS improvements. But the two biggies, or the one biggie that's certainly released and one that's still, I think, work in progress, but may well be soon to be released, is the routing switch for vSAN workloads. But zero data loss at distance is now possible in a GDPS continuous availability solution. This is an extension of the concept first introduced for metro distance zero data loss. And I've got a slide on this coming right up. So what does zero data loss at distance really mean? Well, what it is it's a requirement to meet let's say, a particular client who's implementing this solution, and they have two metro distance sites within one region, and they have an out of region location as well. And so what they are able to do is, using multi-target metro mirror, have a setup very much like the zero data loss at metro distance, where you have an intermediate site with the data that is software replication specific. So this is the logs and the compression dictionary are staged to this RS3 device in the intermediate site here. And then we use global mirror to replicate that set of devices to the out of region data center. And with new functionality in the DS8000 and DB2 and everything else, we can now read from the GM journals, and we can provide consistent data to the proxy DB2 in the same way that we do if we read from the secondaries of the Metro in the zero data loss solution at metro distance, to allow that DB2 to present the information to the capture process and then to the apply engines to copy the data into your other active instance of the DB2. So here we can now go, effectively unlimited distance with zero data loss, as long as you don't lose both sites in region A. Clearly, if you were to lose both locations in region A, then you will have some degree of data loss, as it is asynchronous replication. But so long as your intermediate site and your production site are sufficiently robust, or far from each other, but still within metro replication distance, then this can give you a very highly available solution and the ability to achieve what you can do with continuous availability in terms of planned region switches and things of that nature. And on that note, we are now down into the small tens of seconds for doing a planned region switch for our, let's say, our gold standard client who has GDPS CA implemented, where they're switching 7 workloads which comprise their entire banking environment between their 2 sysplexes. So yeah, I think the last test was around 19 seconds of user impact time to switch locations, which is quite impressive. I think you'll agree. Okay, so that's 0 data loss at distance in GDPS continuous availability. We had planned earlier in the year a number of SPEs, as we usually do. Some of those have come to fruition. Some of those may still come to fruition. Others will not. That is the nature of the work we do. We make plans, and those plans do change. For example, we will not, in the 4.3 timeframe, be introducing role-based security for LCP. However, we are enhancing LCP significantly, not only with the GM code, which was first introduced in 4.2, but also we are supporting new capabilities within the 9.1 microcode on the DS8000 to allow automatic handling of extent pool and backup volume exhaustion. So we can help monitor and manage the dynamic expansion of these capacities. There are also enhancements to the LCP capture script statement, particularly in MGM foresight environments, but the LCP capture statement now does everything that you will need in order to capture a safeguarded backup. And that includes pausing any GM legs in the session that are required, or whatever other actions are needed to make up a composite capture process. And so it used to be you had to use a test copy script statement in order to capture the test copy and then do the capture, but now it's all integrated into a single script statement. The Restful API is still waiting final test clearance, so for GM and MGM, so that's not yet made it off the deck. We're hopeful that that will come out fairly soon. There have been some health checking and extensions released. These are related to CFRM and channel path recovery and things of that nature, as you can see on the chart. And there was plans, and I believe it's been released, the parallel processing for copy once data movers has been released for our XRC clients. Okay, so what is this workflow enhancement? I've made mention of it so far on a number of occasions, and let's see what it really means. So, as I mentioned in the summary, it's the ability to start a script at any statement. So when you go to execute a script, previously it started at the first statement and ran all the way through till the end, we hope. Now you can select which statement you wish to start from. So if you have a script failure, for example, you can restart it at the statement either after or the statement that failed, depending on what actually happened and so on. Furthermore, if you have a processing scenario that you are trying to do at that moment in time, and you haven't got the right script coded, but you have the right actions in a different script, if you ignore the first, I don't know, few statements, then you can now go into that existing script and only execute from that point onwards. Furthermore, you can stop a script that is executing. Now, GDPS scripts can execute quite quickly. So you have to have your wits about you if you're going to go and start stopping scripts while they're running. But some script statements do take a significant amount of time. So what you can do is there's a dialogue, then we'll come on to that in due course, which allows you to go in and inject a stop at the next script statement indicator, and GDPS will check that indicator every time it starts executing a new step. If it finds it set, it will stop. As simple as that. And you can then clear that condition, that stop indicator, by going into a panel or by re-executing the same script. It's available in all GDPS flavors, but as I mentioned earlier, it does not allow you to cancel the currently executing script. The only recourse, well, the best recourse there is to cancel NetView, which is a bit brutal, I understand, but there are inherent risks of cancelling executing GDPS script statements. So how does this work? Basically, you've got a very simple example here. You can restart or start a script at any statement. You've executed a script that failed. So in this case, the activate of CBU failed for some reason. We don't know what, but for example, it did. Well, it failed at 12:15, and we can then go in and, mouse has lost control. You can go in and re-execute starting just from step 3. Very simple, very basic, or so it seems. Obviously, there's a little bit of code required behind it, but it gives you that ability. And likewise, you can, if you decide you don't want to execute a script, you can now go in and stop. And how do we do it? I mean, these are charts you can review at your leisure, but there's a new option called script management from the GDPS scripts panel. And in here, you can stop an active script and you can reset the indicator. When you go into a script, you can move the S. The first script statement is always going to be selected, but you can move, you can go and blank that out and put the S on whichever step it is you wish to execute from. So that's one of the more powerful ones. When you have a script running, it will be indicated in the script management panel, as I mentioned, and it's here that you can inject this stop request. And here we have a script that has had a stop request injected, and we had, I won't say endless debates about whether we should call this a stopped script or a failed script, and the failed camp won. So we call it a failed script, even though it was potentially stopped, or it could have failed. So I think the reason was we didn't want to have conditional logic in there that had to understand whether it had been stopped or whether it had been failed. So we landed on the failed terminology, and you just reset that indicator, or you can re-execute that script, as I mentioned, in order to clear the indicator. Any scripts that have got a failed statement indicator set, then you have highlighted in yellow within the list of scripts available in your environment. Okay. And if you try and go into that, you will see which step of that script had actually failed. So that's the workflow enhancements piece, as I say, available in all flavors of GDPS. And now let's talk about the LCP enhancements. So LCP is a very hot topic in the industry in general. Ransomware and other, let's say, viruses or software injected problems are rife, and the current pandemic is making things even more intense, I think, in this space. I was reading only this week that there are more high risk of attack has been issued to healthcare industries around the world, which is quite worrying, obviously, given the current reliance on healthcare providers to look after patients in these troubled times. But in GDPS and on the mainframe, we provide a capability through safeguarded copy or flash copy, and either GDPS or indeed CSM to protect your mainframe environment. And we've done this now for a few releases. So 4.1 was the first toe in the water from a GDPS perspective, where we provided many of the building blocks, the initial building blocks for the LCP that we know today. And it supported just 10 additional flash copy sets to be defined to GDPS with no UCB and things of that nature, and one recovery copy. Now, this was, GDPS 4.1 was released, 6 to 8 months before the DS8000 provided safeguarded copy support, and we wanted to get this out and available to clients as soon as we possibly could. So 4.2 is where we then started building in the safeguarded copy support. But in the GA release, we didn't have time to get that fully baked. But we did introduce the LCP restore and LCP recover script statements rather than having to do native flash copy commands or native flash copy script statements within the GDPS environment. 4.2 SPE, so this was the support that came in at the back end of last year, delivered the safeguarded copy support. It provided the management profiles that I touched upon, I think, last year in this session, and enables you to define different characteristics for your different safe copy needs. And we also introduced the physical isolation with global mirror. So this is for Metro 2-site clients, and also to enable a GM leg off the Metro primary or secondary to capture safeguarded copy backups into the vault. In 4.3, we've introduced additional topology support. We now support MGM 3-site environments with physical isolation, and we will very shortly be releasing the necessary changes for the virtual MGM 3-site as well. As I mentioned, the security enhancements SPE will not see light of day this year, and we hope it will come out next year. But we have provided other additional enhancements, such as improved messaging if things go wrong. We have provided the support for the dynamic capacity expansion that I briefly mentioned, and we are shortly to release the ability to define multiple recovery copy sets in your LCP environment as well. So briefly to recap, virtual and physical isolation. I mentioned it a few times during the summary, and just so that you've got it cemented in your mind, an LCP environment with virtual isolation, the safeguarded copy backups are stored within the same DS8000 as one of your production HADR copies. Now, whether that's the live production copy or whether that's a DR copy in a third site somewhere, it doesn't matter. It's still in the same physical footprint as one of your copies of HADR. So in this example, it's in a Metro Mirror context. The Metro Mirror, let's call it the secondary for argument's sake, is in the same box as the safeguarded repository. Whereas a physical isolation, my mouse is very sensitive today. I'll try and avoid you touching it, going anywhere near it. The physical isolation, the safeguarded backup, is in a completely different box to your HADR solution. And with the ability to use global mirror between these two environments, depending on your configuration, then that box can be, at significant distance away from your production environments. But be careful what you ask for, and if that's what you really think you want, ask yourself, how am I going to use that copy of data if things go really bad? How quickly can I deliver the compute to process production workload against this now remote copy of the data? Maybe you can, maybe it's and maybe that's part of your design, but just be aware that that is one of the inherent characteristics is because it is separate, therefore it may need copying back before you can use it in anger. So what is available? So as mentioned, on the Metro code base, we have MM2 site, MM3 site with virtual isolation available. We have the MGM3 site with physical isolation. Is a Metro, in fact, there's an error on this chart, is using the Metro Lcp manager. We will be releasing soon the ability to use the virtual isolation in MGM3 site. That's both off either the Metro or the GM environment, but right now that's actually not true, but it will be hopefully before the middle of this month. We support MGM4 site with physical isolation. And as I touched on, the MZGM configurations we support with them in the Metro part of an MZGM configuration, we do support virtual isolation. We haven't fully tested it in 3 site. We did fully test it in 4 site. We've got a client who's live with it in 4 site, but we believe it just requires somebody to adopt it for 3 site, and it works. We do not see any issues why the MZGM 3 site solution would not be fully working. For the GM based LCP manager, as I mentioned, GM 2 site with virtual isolation is due to be released middle of this month as a 4.3 SPE. It was available on 4.2. It's just that 4.3 testing had run out of road for our general availability release. And also the MM2 site with physical isolation is available as well. Oh, and I didn't silence my phone. Hang on, 1 second. So what do we provide in LCP? So we provide safeguarded copy. We provide in Metro flash copy support. We provide these management profiles. We provide the ability to tag which capture within a profile will be the target of a script action, so that you can identify, I want the one at 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever time, happens to be the one you want to start looking at. And this tagging and so on is available not only through the GDPS user interfaces, be that green screen or the web UI, but it's also available through the REST API as well. And we provide the necessary checks within the config process to ensure that you are not removing devices which may have still valid backup data on them, because quite frankly, that could be classed as a malicious act. So you have to go through a process to ensure that devices are correctly identified as being safe to delete prior to actually removing them from the config, so that you're not at risk, or somebody should not, is not at risk of accidentally or deliberately removing devices from the safeguarded backup which have critical data on them. The scripts themselves enable you to capture, recover, or release, capture a copy, recover a copy onto the recovery devices, or release expired copies. And also you can terminate a recovery copy to say that I no longer need that copy that's on the recovery set of devices that I was previously using. And as mentioned in the Metro code base, we also have flash copy support. We have not introduced that into the GM code base at this point in time. If there is a requirement to, we will, but we are waiting for clients to request it. So here's our Metro virtual air gap LCP. We're capturing, in this case, off the RS2 device. And within the same box, if you remember, this is virtual air gap, so it's within the same box. We have all the copy sets for all the devices, so multiple sets of copies of the RS2 set of devices, which can then be presented to the recovery copy via the recover script statement. And this recovery copy can then be used by recovery LPARs in order to carry out forensics or surgical repair or validation that the data is good prior to backing it off to tape if you want to have some longer term retention of your safeguarded backups. We have, if I can find, we have the MGM 4 site. So this is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum to the Metro Mirror 2 site, which is the most compact of our configurations. This is the sprawling configuration where we have our MGM 4 site configuration here on the left-hand side of the chart. We then use a global copy session to copy that data out to our LCP source device. And we can make this consistent by pausing Global Mirror. So Global Mirror is paused. We allow the updates to flow through to RS5. We fail over the relationship. And so then we can resume Global Mirror as quickly as possible. And we can, then capture in our own good time that safeguarded copy backup. And again, it's the same principle. These will be all in the same box. The source, the captures, and the recovery copies are all in the same physical footprint, but here they are physically isolated from your production HADR solution. The MGM 4 site configuration, by the way, also supports dual leg. Waha! I'm not touching the mouse, honest. Also supports multi-target Metro Mirror, so we can provide yet another copy for those who have that requirement for extensive testing or whatever purpose you may wish to think up. The GM virtual air gap is supported for the GM secondaries, obviously, in that we can capture here a consistent point-in-time copy of your GM secondary devices, again, by pausing the Global Mirror session in a consistent state and capturing that backup, again, presenting to a recovery sysplex in the same way as we've seen for other use cases. The physical Metro Mirror 2 site air gap. Here we have our Metro Mirror sysplex happily, merrily working away. And we have our separate box with a Global Mirror session feeding data in. And again, we pause Global Mirror periodically in order to then capture a consistent point in time on one of these copy sets within the vault or protected environment. Almost identical, but not quite the same, is for if it was dual leg Metro Mirror. And likewise, almost the same is Metro Global 3 site. Again, we have a global copy session off the GM secondaries, and we can pause Global Mirror and enable this device to become consistent, take the safeguarded copy, and then resume Global Mirror. Well, we can resume Global Mirror as soon as we've failed over the relationship between RS3 and RS4 to minimize any RPO drift. So we take care of all of that within this LCP capture script statement to optimize the capture process as much as we can. Okay. And the final, I think this is the final example. No, we've got one more after this, but the final, the GM 3 site virtual topology, where we're capturing off the GM secondaries again. So same as in effect, the GM 2 site virtual air gap. And then we have the GM physical air gap, where we can have a global copy off the GM secondaries, very much in the same way as we do for the MGM 3 site physical or the MGM 4 site physical topologies. So most, if not all of certainly all the Metro and MGM and GM solutions will have LCP topologies supporting them. So as mentioned in the summary, PMT has been reborn. So there is a new PMT available. It is only suitable for GDPS version 4. Now, hopefully you're all on GDPS version 4 already, or very soon will be, because version 3 has now been out of support since April, and is available at GA with 4.3 and via that APAR that's mentioned there for 4.1 and 4.2 clients. It is shipped as part of GDPS as compiled recs. There is no source provided, so it's no longer classed as a tool in the sense that it was a tool before. It's now basically an integrated part of the GDPS solution. Issues and questions can be submitted via the GDPS support cases as for any other part of GDPS. It is also partly integrated with the DASD config process. So rather than it being separate and not related to DASD config, it is now integrated into that process. The main function, as I've said, is to simplify the process to add or indeed delete device pairs from the Metro configuration to minimize the exposure where hyperswap or mirroring are in a not okay state. We support the add and delete of pairs in MM2 site, plus in GDPS Metro for 3 site and 4 site, and the same for GM or XRC multi-site configurations. And it's only for the CKD disk. It does not yet support fixed block. It is planned to support fixed block, and likewise, it is also planned to support the multi-target configuration as well. As mentioned there, the data migration mode is not currently supported. Another extension for the future. This just gives you a schematic of how much saving there can be in time of which hyperswap is not okay if you were to run a config to introduce new devices and then run start secondary. Start secondary being an asynchronous process, it clearly depends on how many devices it is you are adding as to how long it's going to take. But that's it just gives you an idea of to how much saving there is, or potential for saving there is using PMT. The configuration wizard. We've introduced a number of XML files for GDPS, and through the GUI, there's the ability to change GeoPalm has been there for some time. But what about all these other XML files that we have now as well? Well, using the same infrastructure in effect as the GDPS GUI, we now have a configuration wizard that enables you to make updates to not only GeoPalm, but GeoGroup, your options, and your scripts. Now we have different types of XML schemas available and we're using. We have this ability to update things like GeoPalm and GeoGroup. And one of the nice things we've done in the configuration wizard is not only to provide online documentation that is alongside the actual member that you are editing, you also get very clear contextual help. So when an error is detected, okay, you get information about that error highlighted to give you a good clue as to what the problem is. Okay, so reduces some of the challenge with either the syntax or the actual understanding what content needs to be provided in these XML members. So this is just an example with GeoGroup and another example with scripts. And so again, if you're coding a scripts and options, if you're coding the option fail on size mismatch, you just move your cursor to fail on size mismatch and up pops the information associated with that keyword to enable you to make an informed decision as to how to code that particular keyword. So it's very powerful, certainly helps people who are less experienced with GDPS to get an idea as to what these somewhat strange keywords and parameters need to be set to. As I mentioned, there are health check updates, and I know I'm running short on time, which is no great surprise, and usually do. So health checks for the ZOS proxy environment are introduced. Most of the health checks that we provide in the GDPS controlling system or production systems are relevant, particularly the production system checks are relevant on the ZOS proxy. In addition, we've introduced checks for the CTC configuration, and that the appropriate address spaces have been started, and so on and so forth. So that's basically extending the health check out to the ZOS proxy environment. You manage them via the health checker through SDSF, because obviously there is no GDPS NetView running on the ZOS proxy. However, we do retrieve back from the ZOS proxy a summary of the checks and exceptions are retrieved back to the master controlling system. Enhancements to the Restful API. We've extended the GDPS IVP program to give you further aid in setting up the GUI if you're having some problems. As mentioned, we've provided the Restful API for GDPS continuous availability, and we hope to soon see that for GM and MGM as well. And we provide also the API for the global XRC clients. Okay, so that is basically what I had. I have got a slide on trends and directions. In terms of what we do in GDPS, this is what we're aiming to achieve. 4 main areas that we're looking to address. One is solution vitality, which is exploiting new capabilities in the platform. An example of that is recent enhancements around SRB. SRB2, as it's also known, that's came out this last quarter, provides not only the initial boost capabilities that were there for stopping systems and loading systems, but also now for hyperswap processing. So when there is some recovery action going on in the environment, the boost will be activated, enabling you to, get back to a fully operating environment as quickly as possible. So that's one of the main themes. The other themes, utilization, simplification. So the wizard is a good example. The workflow enhancements around the ability to stop scripts or start them from different steps. More auditability. You might say we could focus a bit harder on this. It tends to drift. It tends to be something that's not being screamed for, I will honestly say, by clients. If you scream louder, it will help to get focus. And of course, continued extensions to the LCP environment. So that was all I had. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. I don't know, Anna, if you've had any sent to you separately.
No.
I would like to thank everybody for attending. The recording will be made available, as well as the charts. The charts are already posted. I am, however, going to make one update to the charts. On this slide, I will be adding a link. I have been requested by some august people in Poughkeepsie, including Dave Sermon and others, to ask you if you are interested in contributing to the themes related to resiliency on the next generation of IBM Z mainframe. There is a questionnaire that they would like people to fill out and submit back to IBM. I will be providing a link to that survey on this chart. I only got the link at about 1 o'clock this morning. I did not have time this morning to add it before presenting, but I will add it to the chart, and I will repost this deck to the GSE website this morning. So with that, unless there is anything else from anybody, either in the chat or If you know, Anna, feel free to allow people to unmute. Please submit your session feedback. This is session 1AA. The QR code, I believe, works. I didn't actually test it myself, but I suspect it does. And thank you for your participation, and have a good conference.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you everybody for attending the session. Have a great day. Thank you.